By May of 1775, fighting had already broken out at Lexington and Concord, and New England militias had surrounded Boston. While attention remained fixed on Massachusetts, Patriot leaders were already looking further north. The capture of Fort Ticonderoga would become one of the first offensive operations of the American Revolution. This is the capture of Fort Ticonderoga. Although Fort Ticonderoga no longer held the significant importance it once had, many Americans understood that it remained valuable. Following the Treaty of Paris in 1763, the French destroyed the fort's powder magazine before abandoning it. Britain occupied the position afterward, but invested very little into maintaining it. By 1775, the fort was defended only by 2 officers and 46 enlisted men of the 26th Regiment of Foot. Some of the soldiers were elderly or disabled, and 25 women and children also lived inside the fort. Even so, the fort still contained numerous cannons, mortars, howitzers, and military supplies. Its position on Lake Champlain also made it strategically important. Whoever controlled Ticonderoga controlled one of the main routes between Canada and the Hudson Valley. British forces stationed there could potentially threaten New York or even approach the colonies from the north. After Lexington and Concord, both sides understood the significance of the fort. General Thomas Gage hoped to strengthen Britain's northern defenses and wrote to Governor Guy Carleton in Quebec, requesting that Ticonderoga and nearby Crown Point both be repaired and reinforced. Unfortunately for the British, his letter would not arrive until May 19th. Even before open fighting began, several Patriot leaders had already considered taking Fort Ticonderoga. John Brown, an American spy from Pittsfield, informed the Massachusetts Committee of Safety that the fort should be taken as soon as hostilities began. Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys also understood its significance due to its location and the artillery stored inside. Meanwhile, Benedict Arnold was traveling to Boston after hearing of the battles of Lexington and Concord. Along the way, he informed Connecticut militia commander Silas Deane of his plan to take the fort. The Connecticut Committee of Correspondence soon began recruiting volunteers from western Connecticut, western Massachusetts, and the New Hampshire grants, modern-day Vermont. When Arnold arrived in Boston, the Massachusetts Committee of Safety approved his proposal. He received a colonel's commission, 100 pounds, gunpowder, horses, and the authorization to recruit up to 400 men to capture Fort Ticonderoga. Arnold departed almost immediately with Captains Eleazar Oswald and Jonathan Brown, who were responsible for raising volunteers. Traveling north, Arnold reached the border of Massachusetts and the New Hampshire grants on May 6th, where he learned another expedition was already underway. He rode through the night to Bennington before continuing to Castleton, where Ethan Allen had gathered his force. By the time Arnold arrived, Ethan Allen had assembled roughly 100 Green Mountain Boys, along with about 40 men recruited by James Easton and another 20 from Connecticut under John Brown. Allen had been elected commander by his men, with Seth Warner serving as one of his lieutenants. Meanwhile, Samuel Herrick and Asa Douglas had already been sent out to secure boats needed to cross Lake Champlain. Captain Noah Phelps had also already conducted reconnaissance inside the fort. Arnold presented his commission from Massachusetts and argued that he should command the expedition. The Green Mountain Boys refused. They had volunteered to serve under Ethan Allen, the man they elected, not an officer from Massachusetts. Rather than allow the expedition to fall apart before it had even begun, Arnold and Allen agreed to share command. Around 11:30 p.m. on May 9th, the Patriot force assembled at Hans Cove in present-day Shoreham, Vermont. The boats finally arrived around 1:30 the following morning, but there were not enough to transport everyone across the lake at once. Only 83 men, along with Arnold and Allen, completed the first crossing. As dawn approached, Asa Douglas had not yet returned with the remaining boats. Knowing that daylight would soon expose their position, Allen and Arnold decided to attack with the men they already had rather than lose the advantage of surprise. A lone sentry stood guard at the south gate. His musket misfired, and he fled as the Patriots rushed through the gate and into the fort. The British soldiers, many still asleep, were awakened as the Americans quickly secured the parade ground and began confiscating weapons. Allen, Arnold, and several others rushed towards the officers' quarters. Lieutenant Jocelyn Felthman awakened Captain William Delaplace, the fort's commander. When Delaplace demanded to know on whose authority the fort was being entered, Ethan Allen famously replied, "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress." Delaplace soon emerged and surrendered his sword. The capture of Fort Ticonderoga, like the storming of Fort William and Mary, had been accomplished without a single death. Only one patriot, Gideon Warren, suffered an injury after being struck by a British bayonet. Later that morning, additional Patriot forces crossed the lake, eventually bringing the total number of Patriots at the fort to roughly 400. Many immediately began plundering military supplies. Benedict Arnold attempted to stop the looting, but was largely unsuccessful. Frustrated, Arnold wrote that Allen's men had been looting the fort, endangering his mission of securing arms and bringing them back to Boston. Relations between Arnold and Allen quickly deteriorated. On several occasions, Allen's men even drew their weapons on Arnold during heated disagreements over command. Despite the tension, the Patriots continued organizing the captured supplies. Arnold spent the next several days cataloging the artillery and military stores at Ticonderoga and nearby Crown Point. The capture of Fort Ticonderoga was only the beginning. On May 11th, Seth Warner captured nearby Crown Point, whose small British garrison offered little resistance. Arnold's men also captured the British schooner Catherine, which he renamed Liberty, along with several smaller boats. Recognizing the importance of controlling Lake Champlain, Arnold soon organized another expedition against Fort St. Jean in Canada. On May 17th, Arnold surprised the small British garrison, captured supplies, and seized the 70-ton sloop of war, Royal George. These victories gave the Patriots temporary control over much of Lake Champlain. As the weeks passed, Ethan Allen and many of the Green Mountain Boys returned home, leaving Arnold with greater responsibility at the captured forts. Eventually, Connecticut sent nearly 1,000 men under the command of Colonel Benjamin Hyman, who assumed command of Fort Ticonderoga and Crown Point. Although the capture of the fort had been relatively bloodless, its long-term importance would be recognized later that year. During the winter of 1775 and 1776, Colonel Henry Knox transported many of the cannons from Fort Ticonderoga to Boston in what became known as the Noble Train of Artillery. Those guns were placed on Dorchester Heights, forcing the British to evacuate Boston in March of 1776. The capture of Fort Ticonderoga had provided the Continental Army with the artillery they desperately needed and helped secure one of the first major American victories in the Revolutionary War. This is the capture of Fort Ticonderoga. If you notice any mistakes or have suggestions for future content, please let us know in the comments below. This is Every Battle Fought.